The monster's secret. Prosecutor hid 3-year-old's eyewitness testimony to frame an innocent dad. The case of Michael Morton is a devastating and compelling true story that functions as a profound indictment of systemic injustice, a powerful narrative of enduring parental love, and a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth through advocacy and forensic science. It is a story structured as a perfect tragedy, where a good man is condemned by corruption and error, only to be resurrected by the very evidence that was hidden from him. The tragedy begins on August 13, 1986, in North Austin, Texas, with the initial discovery that sets the entire chain of catastrophic events in motion. A man found a 3-year-old boy wandering alone outside the Morton residence with a soiled diaper. This boy, Eric Morton, was the son of Christine and Michael Morton, who were described as good parents who would never let him out of their sight. The neighbor's immediate concern turned to horror when he went inside and found Christine's body in the master bedroom, brutally murdered with a large blunt object. Sheriff Jim Boutwell of Williamson County was called to the scene, finding Christine's body covered with a blanket, a blue suitcase, and a wicker basket. The investigation immediately began with a fundamental and fatal error. The police quickly decided that Michael, the husband, was the killer. This swift conclusion was based on flimsy circumstantial evidence: the absence of forced entry, no signs of theft, and the discovery of a note written by Michael to Christine the night before, which mentioned an argument about sex. This note, which Michael insisted was playful banter with his wife, was instantly contorted into a premeditated motive. When Michael called home from work, having gone to pick up Eric at daycare, only to find he was never brought in, he was met with Sheriff Boutwell on the line, who immediately summoned him home without mentioning Christine's death. Michael found the police questioning to be immediately adversarial, accusatory. Sensing the sheriff had already determined his guilt, husband did this. The sheriff even refused Michael's heartbroken request to see his deceased wife. The devastating human cost of this rush to judgment was made brutally clear on September 25, 1986, when Sheriff Boutwell and deputies arrived at Michael's home to arrest him. Michael, completely stunned, pleaded that they had to be kidding. The narrative reaches its first emotional peak when a deputy forcibly pulled 3-year-old Eric from his father's arms as Michael was being handcuffed. Eric was screaming for his father with outstretched arms as he was taken away. The boy had just lost his mother, and the state, in its gross error, had now violently taken his father too, setting him on a path to a life without either parent. The trial of Michael Morton began on February 9, 1987, less than 6 months after the murder. The prosecutor was District Attorney Ken Anderson, a man known for being aggressive and smart, for whom this murder case was a potential career-defining victory. Anderson was ready to do anything to put Michael in prison, even breaking the rules. Anderson weaponized the note, selling the jury a story that Michael was unhappy, wanted out of the marriage, and killed Christine in a fit of rage after she refused sex on his birthday. Anderson even focused his questioning on Michael's infrequent sexual relationship with his wife. Michael testified that Christine was alive when he left for work around 6 a.m., suggesting she was killed after he left, and explaining the note as a simple, playful disagreement. Michael's defense collapsed when Anderson introduced his final, devastating witness, medical examiner Dr. Roberto Bayardo. Dr. Bayardo testified under oath that based on Christine's stomach contents, the time of death was estimated to be 1 a.m., 4 hours before Michael's alibi. This scientific proof against him effectively sealed his guilt in the jury's eyes, and Michael's alibi fell apart. But the truth, known to the prosecutor, was that Dr. Bayardo was unable to accurately determine the time of death, and Anderson had still used his unreliable testimony as scientific fact to secure a conviction. Anderson then delivered his closing argument, putting the final nail in the coffin by fabricating a claim of sexual assault against Christine, a claim for which he had no proof, but which he emotionally sold to the jury with tears in his eyes. The jury quickly deliberated and found Michael Morton guilty of murder, sentencing him to life in prison. Michael was stunned, claiming his innocence as he was escorted out of the courtroom, but no one believed him. The consequence of Ken Anderson's misconduct was dual and profound. An innocent man was jailed for life, and the real killer was left free to kill again. Michael spent year after year languishing in his cell, rejected on every appeal. His only contact with Eric was through court-ordered visits every 6 months. Initially like oxygen to Michael, he watched his son become distant, a stranger, even hearing Eric call his sister-in-law Mom. The distance culminated when Eric, entering his teens, requested to suspend the visits. Because the visits were court-ordered, Eric needed his father's permission. Heartbroken, Michael requested one final visit, where Eric had to look him in the eye to confirm his wish. Eric looked at the floor and confirmed it, cementing Michael's total loss. A loss made all the more painful because Eric was raised to believe his father had killed his mother, a narrative successfully sold to Christine's family by Ken Anderson. The ultimate betrayal came on Eric's 18th birthday, when Michael received a letter informing him that Eric was going to legally change his name and be adopted, an official, legal loss of his son. Michael, who had survived the murder, the conviction, and the life sentence, admitted, "When I lost him, that's what broke me." He knew that the only path to reclaiming his son was to prove his innocence in court. The path to vindication began in 2004, 17 years into Michael's sentence, when the Innocence Project agreed to take his case. Civil attorney John Rayleigh accepted what would be his first murder case. Rayleigh immediately spotted the red flags, noting that a murderer would never leave a note calling attention to an argument with his wife. He recognized the conviction was built on no real evidence of guilt, no eyewitness, and unreliable scientific testimony. Dr. Bayardo had no access to the body for days and used stomach contents alone to time the death, a method medically recognized as unreliable and which should never have come into evidence at all. Rayleigh's commitment deepened after meeting Michael, who recounted his last birthday with Christine, an evening of renewed joy before the tragic morning. Rayleigh, a father himself, was profoundly moved by Michael's integrity and his description of Eric being ripped from his arms. He went home and told his wife, "My God, he's innocent. We have to get him out." And she told him simply, "Then do it." Rayleigh immediately began the fight to test the critical piece of overlooked evidence from the 1986 investigation. A bloody blue bandana found 100 yards from the house near a construction site. In 1986, there was no DNA testing, so the bandana was simply stored. When Rayleigh sought to access the evidence in 2005, he was denied access by the Williamson County District Attorney's Office. The DA at the time was John Bradley, a protege of Ken Anderson, who is now a powerful district judge. Rayleigh was told by Bradley that testing the evidence would simply muddy the waters, a sign that the DA's office was protecting Anderson, who had much to lose if the DNA test proved Michael was innocent. The political machine was strong against Rayleigh. After a hearing in 2008, where a judge seemingly influenced by Bradley rejected his request, Rayleigh drove nearly 200 miles to Bradley's office, enraged. In a moment of righteous fury, Rayleigh confronted Bradley, loudly asking where his courage was. What are you afraid of? I can handle the truth. Can you, sir? Michael's integrity was tested again in 2008 when he was offered parole, with one catch. He had to confess his guilt to murder. Michael had spent 21 years in prison and had no idea where his son was. Yet he refused, telling Rayleigh, "All I have left is my actual innocence. And if I have to be in prison the rest of my life, I'm not giving that up." This principled refusal solidified Rayleigh's promise. "I will never quit. As long as I'm breathing air, I'm trying to get you out of prison." After 6 long years, the Court of Appeals finally ruled that the defense could perform DNA testing on the bloody bandana. Rayleigh's team simultaneously filed a Freedom of Information Act request for Ken Anderson's trial files, suspecting further concealment. The files revealed a truth far more disturbing than Rayleigh ever expected. The evidence of Michael's innocence was in the district attorney's file and had been concealed. The concealed evidence included strange fingerprints, a footprint, and a sighting of a strange man in a van near the home days before the murder. The most crucial and heartbreaking concealed evidence was the verbatim transcript of a conversation between Eric and his grandmother, Christine's mother, Rita, on the day of the funeral. 3-year-old Eric, the only eyewitness, described the crime, saying the monster hit his mommy and threw a blue suitcase on the bed. When asked the critical question, "Was Daddy there?" Eric replied, "No, Mommy and Eric was there." Ken Anderson knew about this evidence that exonerated Michael and still sent him to prison, claiming detectives convinced Rita that the monster was just Michael, whom Eric didn't recognize. This crucial information was concealed for 25 years. In June 2011, after 25 years in prison, the DNA results came back. The blood on the bandana contained Christine's DNA and the DNA of a man who was not Michael. That DNA profile was run through the database and yielded a direct hit on a man with a felony record, Mark Allen Norwood. Norwood had escaped detection for 25 years. Rayleigh's team quickly connected Norwood to the 1988 cold case murder of Deborah Jan Baker, who lived 10 miles from the Mortons and was killed in an almost identical way: blunt force trauma, body covered with household objects, and no sexual assault. DNA testing on hair from the Baker crime scene confirmed Norwood was Deborah Baker's killer. Ken Anderson's misconduct had not only imprisoned Michael, but also allowed Mark Allen Norwood to take Deborah Baker's life. With the truth exposed, District Judge Ken Anderson attempted to salvage his reputation with a televised, insincere apology, denying any misconduct. He was confronted by Deborah Baker's daughter, Caitlin, who told the media Anderson was, in part, responsible for her mother's murder because he let Norwood go. Michael's attorneys pursued a special criminal inquiry for Anderson's deliberate concealment of evidence. After a long legal battle, Ken Anderson was disbarred, disrobed, and became the first prosecutor in history to be sent to jail for official misconduct, resulting in a wrongful conviction. Mark Allen Norwood was convicted of both the murders of Christine Morton and Deborah Baker and received 2 life sentences. Michael Morton was finally released. Standing in the sun, feeling the warmth on his face, he simply drank it in. The story culminates in a private dinner arranged by John Rayleigh, to which Michael's son, Eric, was invited. The resemblance between father and son was immediately evident in their movements and clothing. The initial handshake between the two quickly morphed into a hug, a natural melding that erased the years of separation. Michael simply said, "Son," and Eric replied, "Dad." A simple, profound exchange that Michael felt gave him a glimpse of what heaven must be like. Michael now calls John Rayleigh his friend and brother, a man to whom he owes his life. Michael Morton emerged from the ordeal not bitter, but transformed, finding a deeper understanding of suffering and unfairness, concluding that the experience of being broken is what ultimately made him who he is, and that life is good now. The true story of Michael Morton is a dramatic narrative of how a 3-year-old boy's eyewitness account, suppressed by a corrupt prosecutor, ultimately became the key to saving his father and revealing a serial killer.